Peach Pundit, the podcast, is a conversation filled with the personal opinions of the people who are participating. Any view or opinion expressed belongs only to the person who expressed it and not with anyone with whom that person is professionally affiliated.
Folks, I don't know if you're listening, if you watch the podcast, but if you do, Buzz Brockway was just air guitaring, and it was awesome.
Well, you're way too kind. I was thinking uncoordinated white guys are last trying to act cool is the last thing the world needs, right?
Well, folks, I'm your host, Jason Pye, joined by Scott Turner and Buzz Brockway. Guys, it's good to see you both. And Scott, I have new music that I can send you because, like,
I like this song. I like it.
It's too happy. It doesn't really,
No.
It's not me.
How could it not be you if you're playing all the instruments?
Because I have 45 other songs on which I play all the instruments.
And I listened to those, and this is the one that I picked. So
no, that's true. You did pick this one.
What you could do is when we're going to be tackling more depressing topics, we put in the more depressing Jason music instead of the happy Jason music.
What Jason has a lot of, though, is like rage-filled type stuff.
Yeah.
And that might have been appropriate for tonight's
when we need to rage, we'll switch over to that.
So it's funny. I was actually last night. Emily's been doing a voiceover or recording an audiobook for someone, and which is something she is a hobby she has, and she's actually very good at it. Listening to her, and because we have a little studio up here, and listening to her last night doing it, it sounded great. So, but before she came up here last night, I was like, well, if you're going to sit here and read this book, you're going to record later. I'm going to go upstairs and play guitar. So that's what I did, and I played a couple songs I had never played before, never tried to learn before, and one of them was "Killing in the Name of" by Rage Against the Machine.
Well, I tell you, that would be appropriate for the way I'm feeling today.
Yeah. Well, I also, until my cover band in DC stopped playing for some unknown reason, we were gonna play Bulls on Parade. That was like on our set list for the next show, and then also Sabotage, but we never got around to those. But by the way, folks, I am finally wearing. You can't spell tariffs without FFS. Sorry, Miss Laura. Miss Laura, in case you don't know, that actually stands for something, and it includes.
Don't Google that, Miss Laura.
Don't Google it. Don't
Google it, Miss Laura. And we have for folks, since I know Buzz and I weren't on last week. I was in Chicago for something. Buzz was also out of town. We had a long conversation with Buzz about his potty mouth.
Yes, I'm a reformed man now.
We have told him it can't happen again.
I'm on strike
I
too.
don't know why Scott bleeped me because I said the F word during it and Buzz said something else. But
I also took the Lord's name in vain during that, and I bleeped to myself.
Wow.
Come on. Good Lord. All right. So anyway, but the t-shirt, you can go to peachpundit.com, go on the tab, check out the merch. We have this shirt and other shirts that you can go and buy.
You gotta get this polo that I'm wearing.
And I got to get Sorry, Miss Laura. I'm going to get that one because I am the Peach Pundit potty mouth. Or Peach Pundit the potty mouth.
Yeah. When Jason is potty mouth, we don't get the ratings that we get when Buzz uses his potty mouth. Everybody wants to hear it from when it's Buzz. It's so shocking, out of character.
So we have.
So what you're saying, FFF stands for family friendly stuff.
Yes,
yes. Yeah, we'll go with that.
We'll go with that.
Miss Laura,
my favorite, my second favorite F word is freedom, according to my coffee mug from R Street.
Yeah, the R Street Institute has that coffee mug. I've asked for because I lost mine, and I've asked for.
I've got
another one. Can I have the other?
If you're nice to me,
I'm on your board.
Doesn't mean
I'm
you're
always
nice to me.
I called you yesterday to say hello.
You did. And then we got interrupted because of our first topic.
Which we're going to come back to. And I figured, I put two and two together later. And I figured that's what it was. But before we get into what I'm sure will be a fascinating discussion we have 6 topics for our sort of long form part of the podcast. We're going to go pay some bills. We will be right back.
Conservatives Concerned is a network of political and social conservatives who question the alignment of capital punishment with conservative principles and values. Our programs include educating conservatives about the failed death penalty system and mobilizing them to bring about its end. We come to this issue for a variety of reasons. Some believe that small government and the death penalty don't go together, especially when we compare the high costs of capital punishment to life without possibility of release. Some don't trust the state to get it right. We already know that some innocent people have been sentenced to death, and for others, it may already be too late. Some believe that the death penalty contradicts our values about protecting life. Find out more at conservativesconcerned.org.
Help wanted. Americans for Prosperity is building an army. If you want to be part of the effort to lay the groundwork for conservative victory, they want you. Paid and volunteer opportunities are available across the state of Georgia. Email infoga@afphq.org. Again, that's infoga@afphq.org to let them know you're interested in joining the cause. Thank you to our friends at Americans for Prosperity and all of our Patreons. If you too would like to be a patron, we have several different tiers starting at the $5 level. It's voluntary. You don't have to do this, but we really do appreciate it. We'll add you to the people who rock. You can head on over to patreon.com/peachpundit and sign up today. Thank you.
So that very same call I mentioned earlier happened on the way up to DC yesterday, where I had a meeting with a House office at 12:30, and I did some work while I was there. Stopped by and gave Senator Paul, his wife Kelly, who a signed baseball from Dale Murphy, which I sent around, send the picture of that to Peach Pundit, the Signal thread. But I also want to note, when I was in the Longworth House office building yesterday, which is the only one I went into, sorry, Reed, I didn't come by. I saw the Alzheimer's Association, a bunch of people wearing the sashes that said Alzheimer's Association. And I thought of our anonymous Patreon. So I know we'll have something later on that, but I just wanted to note that I did see that yesterday. And before I forgot, I just wanted to make a note of it. But I did call Scott yesterday. And Scott and I were having a little bit of a discussion about a discussion we had the prior day. And about 10, 15 minutes into the phone call, Scott goes, I'm getting a phone call. I got to jump. I'll call you back. Of course, his ass never called me back, but he has a good reason why. And Scott, go ahead.
So when Jason called me yesterday morning, we were discussing something that happened the previous day, like he said, and it was a bit crazy. So my mind wasn't in the right place when Mark Nisi from the AJC called to let me know that eternal vigilance case had against the state election board had been ruled in our favor by the state Supreme Court, that it was a unanimous decision. He asked me if I had a reaction. I said, look, I've got to call my attorney. I've got to look at something in this before I give you a comment. And then I called him back and I asked him, did they overturn DOTV Atlanta? And he's like, yeah. And I said, yeah. I said, that's my reaction. He goes, I can't print that. And I'm like, well, that was our goal. That's my reaction for now. I'll get you a statement. Just give me a minute. I promise you. I'll email it to you. So I emailed him a statement.
Sorry, Miss
later.
Laura.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll bleep myself. But all right, folks. So let's talk about what happened exactly at the Georgia State Supreme Court, because it's kind of a big deal, especially if you're into things like constitutional government, I don't know, separation of powers, or legislators making laws. For decades now, Georgia has been living under this little legal gem called DOTV Atlanta. It basically said, sure, the legislature can give out vague outlines and sort of an idea, and then let the bureaucracy go and fill in the blanks whenever they want. And if that sounds familiar, it should. It was our version of Chevron deference. You know, that beloved federal doctrine that let unelected regulators write half of the laws that we're all stuck living under. Except this was the Georgia grown version. But here's the good news. We killed it. We killed it. In our case, yes, I'm one that's in the case. I was one of the defendants that the court actually ruled had standing in the case, along with James Hall, who is a Patreon of ours, but also a friend and a solid conservative and courageous for jumping up and saying, I will do this. The court finally said, wait a second. The Constitution says legislative, executive, and judicial powers are supposed to be separate. Maybe we should try that. And with that, DOTV Atlanta was tossed into the constitutional dumpster where it belongs. The court replaced it with a 3-step framework that basically says these 3 things. First, agencies don't get to make up their own powers. Second, if the legislature didn't say it clearly, you don't get to pretend like they did. And 3, if the rule doesn't fit what the statute actually allows, it's gone. Imagine that for a second. Laws made by people you can actually elect. What a concept. The court laid out a clear 3-step process that tests this for future cases. For agencies like the State Election Board, they just can't make stuff up. They actually have to be given the authority by the legislature. And if that sounds like a basic idea to you, congratulations. You're a conservative with a functioning brainstem. But this is where things get weird. Guess who intervened as defendants in my case? My own party.
I was going to say, I know. I know.
Yeah. My own party. The Georgia Republican Party, under Josh McCoon's leadership, jumped in to defend the state election board's power to unilaterally write rules with vague authority and zero accountability. And here was Josh McCoon's statement that we received via a friend who had gotten it from Josh. And this is Josh's words, and I'm quoting here. I am pleased the Georgia Supreme Court upheld the 2 rules the Georgia Republican Party originally submitted for consideration to the state election board in June of 2024. We are hopeful the nonsensical challenge to these common sense rules will be dropped immediately. As for the other rules, I am shocked and disappointed that the justices chose to reverse decades of precedent that will set a negative precedent and will impact Georgia government in areas beyond election integrity. I look forward to working with the legislature to finish passage of HB 397, which will codify the rest of these common sense rules. We will lobby our senators and representatives to explicitly address SEB rulemaking to prevent radical left-wing groups and their allies from constantly using lawfare to undermine our efforts to assure Georgians that our elections are fairly executed. Signed, Josh McCoon, Chairman, Georgia Republican Party. So let me get this.
Welcome to the left wing. Apparently, we're all left wingers now. Huh?
Well,
Not even.
Well, let me get this straight. After 4 decades of fighting against unchecked agency power in Washington, suddenly the Georgia GOP wants to expand it in our backyard.
Mm-hmm.
They want not just the state election board, but all unelected boards to operate with ambiguous, unmitigated authority not tied to the law passed by the General Assembly. That's not conservative. That's administrative tyranny with a red tie on. And now McCoon is out there with this press release claiming this is somehow a negative precedent. Josh, buddy, the only negative precedent that would have been set is letting your agency buddies keep writing rules like they're legislators without having anyone answer to them at the ballot box. That's not how representative government works. At least not in a party that claims it still believes in limited government. He also said he's pleased the court upheld the 2 rules the GOP originally submitted. Nah. One of those rules was upheld. One.
Right.
The 2 others were sent back because the court couldn't determine standing yet. Basically, James Hall is an election official. And 2 of those rules would have impacted him, but not me. So they sent it back to the court, the lower court, to ask them to settle this, whether or not he has standing to challenge the 2 other remaining rules. But the 4 of the 7 rules, the most obnoxious rules, they're dead because they were illegal, because the SEB didn't have the authority, because, get this, the Constitution still matters. So what is Josh's solution to this problem? He wants to go talk to the legislature. And that's fine. That's how it's supposed to work.
Right.
That's how laws are supposed to be made. If you want to change the law, pass a bill. But don't cry about radical left-wing lawfare when conservatives who actually believe in limited government take the fight to court and beat your ass. This ruling isn't radical, it's restorative. It restores the rule of law. It restores proper balance of power. And it restores basic principles that we used to all agree on, that if you want to govern people, you need to be accountable to them. So no, Josh, this isn't a loss for election integrity. It's a win for constitutional integrity. And as a conservative, I'll take that every day of the week. Georgia just made a bold stand for limited government. It's just too bad that the party didn't stand with us. That's it. That's my rant.
I'm going to let Buzz go, and then I have something to say.
Well, Scott, I'll just say, I mean, in full disclosure, I'm a board member of Eternal Vigilance Action, as is Jason, and we of course, you brought this to us and said we need to decide: do we want to, as the board, authorize you to go forth and raise the money necessary and hire the attorneys necessary and file the suit? And I mean, it was unanimous. Yes, go for it. So, Scott, you're to be applauded, I think, first of all, for having the guts to stand up for this fight, and as is James, Hall, for joining with you. A group of our former colleagues, Scott, as you recall, filed a friend of the court brief siding with you and James in this fight, and just I don't want this to sound overly mean, because I get it, and we'll talk more about the predicament that our friend Josh McCoon finds himself in, being the head of this party that has gone off the rails. But Senator McCoon would have been up cheering this ruling, because he would have a bill in his pocket to try to convince his colleagues in the Senate of whatever changes he wanted to make, and he would cheer the restoration of this balance of power that's gotten, had been tilted toward the bureaucrats. And I don't mean that in a negative way. These are just, this is the growth of government over 50 years since the Chevron decision, and states, as you mentioned, states all adopted the same thing because they took their lead from the Supreme Court. And I'll say that I'll finish with this: I'm an appointed person on an unelected board for the Charter School Commission. As y'all know, one of Speaker Burns's appointments to that post. Our pal Mike Dudgeon is on there too, and as former legislators, we contemplate this all the time. Are we operating within the statutory limits that the legislature has authorized us to do? Are we carrying out those tasks, or are we exceeding? If we make this decision and implement this rule in our rules in the governance of charter schools, are we exceeding our authority? We've had conversations with numerous legislators over the years. Hey, this and that need to happen, and we don't know that we can do it. And would the legislature entertain changing the law? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And so we try to do that. But I think this ruling helps folks like me who do serve on these kind of boards. Hey, we must operate within the confines of the law and with the authority that the legislature gives us, and not outside it. And if you're a conservative who is frustrated when you hear Joe Biden talk about how I'm going to, by a stroke of my pen, I am going to wipe out student loans, he's exceeding his authority as the executive, right? And then the courts smack him down. And then you hear all these members of Congress, oh, goodness, what are we going to do? Drop a freaking bill, do your job. I mean, that's what, thank the Lord. I know MAGA has turned on the very Supreme Court that Republicans, and specifically Donald Trump, have appointed, that overturned the Chevron doctrine. It's a shame that is the case, and it's a shame that conservatives aren't across this state, or those that call themselves Republicans, aren't standing up and cheering this ruling, because it's in the same vein. It's just, legislators, do your job. You have to do your job. You can't just punt things off to unelected boards and unelected bureaucracy to the heavy lifting for you so that you can provide yourself cover. You're going to have to actually do your jobs. So that's my rant.
It's a good rant. Both good rants. The only thing I think I have to add here is that partisanship, particularly the hyper-partisanship that political parties bring, and it's a both sides thing, is destructive, it's cancerous, and it has metastasized to good people who throw their principles out the window for the sake of some sort of expediency, whether it's personal gain, and I'm not making that allegation here, but being chairman of a state party is some measure of personal gain. Whether it's winning re-election to that role, whether it's some sort of notoriety in the eyes of a president whose ass you kiss all the time. I'm surprised your lips aren't orange.
You hand down there?
I don't know. Who knows? My point to all this is the Josh McCoon who I knew, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, 600 years ago, 700 years ago, 800 years ago, 900 years ago, 1000 years ago, 2000 years ago, 3000 years ago, 4000 years ago, 5000 years ago, 6000 years ago, 7000 years ago, 8000 years ago, 9000 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, 600 years ago, 700 years ago, 800 years ago, 900 years ago, 1000 years ago, 2000 years ago, 3000 years ago, 4000 years ago, 5000 years ago, 6000 years ago, 70 was a good man, a very principled man, who, if I had said that the non-delegation doctrine meant something and that agency should not be allowed to interpret rules without some sort of challenge, which what we know as the Chevron deference, talked about the constitutionally limited government. The Josh McCoon who I knew would have agreed with all of those things.
Yes, 100%.
But he's bought into the cult, and he has become a completely different person.
So I'll just say this, Jason, about the partisanship part. We had all Republicans, some former lawmakers, some current or sitting lawmakers, join our case in filing an amicus in support of it. So there are Republicans beyond the the two that you see here and the one classical liberal. Buzz and I still identify as Republicans. There are Republicans beyond Josh McCoon who agreed with us. He doesn't speak for all of the Republicans on this.
No, I know he doesn't. And
I just want to make that clear to our audience.
No, and I want to clarify that I know that. And I know that there are Republicans in elected office and elsewhere who don't agree with the party apparatus. But when it comes to the party, when it comes to red team versus blue team, that's specifically what I'm talking about. And there are there's certainly people who are not blinded by partisan politics. And I certainly wish there were more people like that these days. But it's my turn.
Yeah, go for it.
And I want to discuss what's happening in Los Angeles. And I wish this was still active because I would have pointed people to it. But yesterday I noticed on Reddit, the subreddit map porn, that there was a map of.
I don't want to Google that either.
No.
It is safer work. So the subreddit map porn had this comparison of maps from the 1992 riots to what is going on in Los Angeles this week and started late last week. And it's not even close to the same scale. Like what you saw in 1992 during I guess it was April of 92, if the Sublime song jogs my memory. There was a Sublime song about the riots in April of 92. It was all over LA in many different neighborhoods. What's happening in Los Angeles today, there's like 4 spots, and they're like, this is not nearly on the same scale, and we have not nearly seen the reaction of the federal government is overkill. And I want to clarify something here. I do not agree with. I wholeheartedly believe in the right to assemble and the right to protest the government, no matter what it's about. I don't want to believe in destruction of property or violence. It's like yesterday in DC. I had to run an errand before I came home, and I drove by a Tesla dealership on my way back to 395. I had to pick up a guitar amp that I let someone borrow. And on my way back, I rode by a Tesla dealership, and there were still people out there protesting, despite the fact that Musk has stepped aside. And there weren't many of them. There was like 10 people. And then getting on 395, heading south, trying to get on 95 to go home, I noticed that there were people over an overpass who had, various messages, everything from, condemning ICE to supporting Ukraine to calling Trump a fascist. That's an acceptable level of protest. You might not agree with the message, but people have a right to say what they want to say, as long as they don't hurt anybody in the process, as long as they're not causing or inciting a riot. But there are agitators. Mm-hmm. We saw that in 2020 during the
George Floyd
protests over the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery down in South Georgia on the coast. That took away from the message. And what the violence and property destruction that is happening, which is, again, it's not on the same scale of what we saw in 92. It's certainly not on the same scale thus far of what we saw in 2020. But those people take away from the message of the protesters. And I'm not saying I agree with everything the protesters are saying, but I do agree with a lot of it. And, but the federal government's approach to this, sending thousands of National Guardsmen and Marines to LA, is a mistake. It's overreach. It's overkill. And I'm afraid it's going to further escalate the situation over time. So I'll shut up. You guys
I have a
tell me
question
why I'm
for you.
wrong.
Have you heard that the mayor of LA has called for a curfew? Last night she did set a curfew.
Yes, I have seen that.
Did you see her press conference where she pointed out that the National Guardsmen are stationary at the federal building? They're not doing anything?
No, I've seen that too.
Yeah.
I've seen both those things. And
Right.
I think the concern with the curfew is that bad things happen at night.
Mhm.
That's typically when those situations, the really destructive situations tend to show themselves. So I think the institution of a curfew is just to simply push or prevent that to what extent they can.
Right. I think,
and I'm aware of the National Guard being stationary. The first couple of days, they didn't even have, I don't think they even had guns the first couple of days they were there, or rifles the first couple of days they were there. But I think the presence of that is unnecessarily escalatory.
so one of the other things that she said during her press conference was that her police were overwhelmed, that they're not equipped or capable of dealing with it. And that's problematic, right? So it's become political because it's Trump. It's become political because it's Gavin Newsom. And here we are retreating to our tribal spaces, right? And I don't want to be guilty of that, but I don't trust what I'm hearing or seeing on cable news. Not even a little bit. I am of the opinion
on any channel, right?
Right.
I mean, I don't,
because they want, if it bleeds,
Yeah.
it leads, right?
Yeah,
and
that's right.
they want it to be bigger than it is. And they want to give us that perception. So I called a friend, had a text exchange with him, who lives in Huntington Beach. It's not far from LA,
No,
but
it's not far from LA.
He's a Trump Republican, and he said it's not very big. It's a small group of people who have bought into some fake TikTok videos, was his take. But they are, in fact, damaging property and setting things on fire. Some Waymo cars have been destroyed. I think for the average American, and especially our audience who is mostly in Georgia, when they see images of dudes standing on top of vandalized Waymo cars that have been spray painted, waving a flag of another country, that invokes emotion. I don't think the average American is going to buy into agreeing with a lot of what they're saying out there. And they don't care if you think it's escalatory. They want it. I think they are playing into Donald Trump's hands on this. He's going to look like he's a law and order guy, and he's doing what's necessary. And because they haven't actually invoked the Insurrection Act at this point, he's showing a level of restraint. He's trying to allow the local police department to get it under control. They better do that quickly, because the images that are coming out of there, even if it's localized and small, they have an impact at an emotional level with the average American. We are not okay with people being interviewed on the street saying, I'm here illegally and I want to help make America a socialist country, which I've seen that. I don't know if it's fake or real.
I haven't seen that.
But I saw
Yeah.
it. I mean, it was a guy.
Well, just to push back a little bit, one, you would agree with me that not everybody who is protesting this is involved in violence or destruction of property.
That's true of every protest.
Yeah.
No,
right?
but I just want to hear
Yeah.
you say it.
No.
Okay.
I concede that that's true of every protest, but I'm also old enough to remember what happened here during 2020 when now candidate for governor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, blamed the police for a guy who tried to tase a police officer getting shot and killed.
The other thing,
causing a major outbreak of violence in a localized area.
And a young girl was shot to death as a result, simply
Yeah.
because they made a wrong turn into an occupied area around a burned out Wendy's. Yeah, I mean, this is the worst news for Keisha Lance Bottoms. Whatever chances she had, this thing happening in LA and other cities finishes off her campaign.
And Chris Carr and Brian Kemp have both had reactions to some of the protests that have happened here. They're both saying, look, we appreciate peaceful protests, but we're not going to tolerate violence. We're not going to tolerate property destruction. And Chris Carr went so far as to remind the protesters, you're not in California.
So I do want to note real fast that there is a poll out on this already, and a plurality of respondents are against the deployment of National Guard and Marines. That came out from the Economist YouGov, came out yesterday.
How many undecided in that poll?
Yeah, it was a large enough number to tip the scale. Because whenever you see that number, that's the people who are going to make up the difference. I didn't look at the crosstabs. I only saw the top lines. Don't have them memorized. Didn't think to pull them up before I started talking about them. But they're out there. But a
I mean,
plurality.
the real concern for me would be if when the Insurrection Act gets invoked. That's when fecal matter hits the fan and is not distributed equally, according to the sign I read in Buzz's office when he was in the legislature.
It is not.
That is true. I'm going to Buzz. I'm going to go to you, and I want to after you, we're going to speed this up some.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot going on here, and I think I'll just focus on this. Jason, you mentioned the partisanship in our last segment. What we see here, it is harming the discussion around this. There are legitimate complaints that one can make about the way that Trump and his administration are going about enforcing immigration law. And there are lawsuits, and there are things that the courts have fought back and restrained some of what Trump has tried to do. But the rhetoric that's coming out of both sides, Trump, in order to play to his base, uses maximalist rhetoric here. I'm sending the Marines and the National Guard. And then on the ground, they're just kind of gathered around, protecting federal buildings. They're not involved directly in squashing the protests. Okay, the Democrats on the other side immediately are talking about how this is the warm-up to the complete takeover and the end of democracy in America as we know it. Trump is going to install himself as dictator for life here, and that's ridiculous as well. Both political parties, the rhetoric has gotten so over the top by elements on both sides, and yes, that's both sides' version, but it's happening. It's the truth, and I fear that it's going to lead to actual worse violence than we've seen. Thank the Lord, nobody has been killed as a result of any of these protests. It's a shame for the Waymo company that's lost a bunch of cars, and they're not cheap cars. I saw some up close while I was in San Francisco last week. Those are not cheap cars. They're Jaguars with cameras all over them. It's a lot of money. But thankfully,
did you see the reporter from Australia get shot with the rubber bullet, and then
yes,
it was a police officer who did that.
It was, and then the CNN reporter who was detained as well.
Yeah, so I guess what I worry about is the political rhetoric that's elements of both parties are engaged in here that make this seem way more than it is, and that's not to minimize what's happening. Okay. Property should not be destroyed. It's given aid and comfort to others, as along Buford Highway here in Atlanta last night, there were 6 or 8 arrests, some damage done to police cars. But the police were very quick to, I think it was Brookhaven City Police. They didn't put up with it, man. They arrested those folks immediately. So hopefully keep that under control and allow for the peaceful protesters who simply, as Jason was saying, want to exercise their free speech rights to say whatever political position they want to say, whether anyone else agrees with them or not. They have that right. But I just worry that it's a further escalation in the political rhetoric that will embolden somebody or some group of people to do something really bad and toss a match and gasoline on this tinder fire that is this pile of tinder that is America right now.
Yeah.
Well, it's your turn, my friend.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to do something light and more fun and less heavy. But college sports, as anybody who has paid attention in the last few years has known, is undergoing unbelievable transformation. Some of it because of court rulings, in that allowing the Supreme Court ruling that colleges cannot prohibit college athletes from cashing in on their name and image and likeness. And we've seen this. There's also been a number of court cases that have tossed out rules that the NCAA had around transfers. And now, so what you wound up with is transfer portals that happen several times throughout the year, depending upon the sport, college rosters. I mean, it's more or less the equivalent in the pro level would be free agency all the time. And imagine trying to manage a roster if you're a football coach or you're a baseball coach, and if you're Raheem Morris of the Atlanta Falcons, and after minicamp, 10 of your players enter the transfer portal and are playing for somebody else next season. So there's been a lot of turmoil around that. And in amongst all that, of course, have been big-time schools, Oklahoma and Texas, for example, joining the SEC, UCLA and USC, and Oregon and Washington joining the Big Ten, and the ACC picked up the scraps of the Pac-12. This mighty conference imploded, and ACC picked up, and now we stretch from coast to coast now in the ACC because we have Cal and Stanford. So all that's kind of crazy, but in amongst all that has been a lawsuit that some of you may have heard about if you've kind of paid attention to this, called the House case. House is the name of a student athlete who is saying, hey, you should have paid me NIL. And that became a class action suit. The settlement was reached. The defendants were the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, and Pac-12, which doesn't exist anymore, and the Big 12. They were the named defendants in this. And the settlement had been reached, and the judge had some thoughts on that settlement. There's been some additional negotiations and tweaks. And the judge finally gave her approval to that last Friday. It's a momentous case because now, for the first time, university athletic departments can directly pay student athletes. That will begin July 1st. So they've been scrambling to set this all up. In addition, a fund is being created that will pay certain former college athletes. About $2 billion, a little over maybe $2.5 billion will go over the next 10 years to former college athletes. At the same time, in preparation of all this, the big conferences that I just referenced developed a new set of rules. The NCAA is effectively, over these big conferences, has very little governance, almost no governance over these big conferences anymore. And they formed what they're calling the College Sports Commission. They've hired a guy named Brian Seeley. He will be the CEO of this entity. He is a former Major League Baseball executive who has experience from outside the college world at the pro level in managing, the Major League Baseball has very complicated salary caps and all those sorts of things, because that's the kind of stuff that's coming to college football, to college sports right now. A part of the House settlement is each school can pay, it's more or less a salary cap, so to speak, in that each college can pay their athletes up to $20.5 million a year. That has to come out of their existing budget. Okay. So this is not new money being poured in. This has to come out of their existing budget. It's revenue sharing. So the athletes are not employees. They're getting a revenue share of the TV money. So all of the big conferences, what they're calling the Power Four, have opted in. They're going to be paying up to $20.5 million a year to their athletes. And so it's becoming this very complicated thing, because you think about it, you think about Georgia or Georgia Tech or FSU or whoever, this $20.5 million is going to pay going to pay all of your athletes, not just your football team, your basketball team, your baseball team, your women's lacrosse team, your women's volleyball team, your swimming team, all of these sports that colleges play. That's what this money is going to go for. Managing that is going to be incredibly complicated. And all these schools, I'm sure Georgia's hired somebody, but Georgia Tech hired a guy out of the front office of the Chicago Bears to come in and manage all of this. It's, the good part about this is athletes are going to be paid. There's some structure around how that's going to happen, puts an end to this lawsuit, and it provides some measure of stability to college sports. Following on pretty soon is probably going to be more rules around the transfer portal, so there's more stability there. You're probably going to see contracts being signed for these things. So if you want to come play at UGA or Georgia, we're going to expect you to sign a multi-year contract where you're not going to just jump in the portal because you're not getting the playing time you think you want, or you think you're going to get a better shot elsewhere. So it's going to be incredibly complicated. But two last things I'll say, and then you guys can comment if you want. But this is probably a temporary Band-Aid, because now you have lots of colleges, and not just little ones, big ones. Notre Dame, the ACC, the Big Ten, have had conversations with private equity firms about and in fact, Florida State has a project they call Project Osceola, where they've explored this at length on how they can bring more money into their athletic department in the form of private equity that's paid out, and provides a return on the investment for the private equity investors. At some point, probably, my guess is around 2030, the year 2030, 2032, somewhere in that standpoint, because that's when all the media rights deals with all these conferences come to an end. And the college football playoff media rights deal that ESPN has, those all come to an end. You could see a radically different college athletic world then, with massive amounts, even more money that's in there now. Would conferences exist? Who knows? And my concern about that is, and really in a lot of this, who is looking at the things that college sports is distinct from pro sports. And I know it's a fiction, if it has been for a long time, that these students are amateurs. They're not. They're semi-professionals now. And who is looking out? Who is thinking about the fans? Okay. I'm a fan of Georgia Tech. I watch college sports because Georgia Tech plays college sports, and where, I want to watch games because what impact does that have on my team? And, can we, is that team going to lose, and how does that help me? And if it's some sort of professional minor league, if college football becomes nothing but minor league NFL, I think it's the interest in it will dry up, because how many people watch minor league baseball? Not many.
I love minor league baseball, and
no, I love it too. I mean, I got a team right around the corner, but I'm saying it doesn't draw anywhere near the kind of TV viewership and inspire the kind of passion that you see out of college football. And if they make it, and if what ends up here is a minor league NFL, I think the passion that we all love about college sports.
You didn't graduate from the Gwinnett strippers, though, Buzz.
I didn't
graduate from there.
I have a couple things. I have a couple things to say. The first one, for someone who is a fan of a college football team that sucks, Buzz is very passionate about this.
We don't suck, by the way.
Two, Scott, do you remember when Buzz said, "I'll be quick"?
Yeah, I do. That was 20 minutes ago.
I took two topics into one. Okay, so
he did.
Yeah.
What's next on the horizon is collective bargaining for student athletes.
No, it is, and I want to say, like in Buzz, where you were going on this long-winded diatribe, I was thinking, man, the one reason I liked college sports was because the kids were fighting for something. They were playing for something. It was to get to that next level. And, I don't disagree with paying them. I don't, particularly when it comes to like private companies or donating money to to the fund for all the players. But the way it has gone is just wildly different from what I expected. And I'm kind of disappointed, because these kids, minor league baseball players, they work for a handful of months out of the year. They don't make a lot of money.
Some of them make $60,000 a year playing baseball.
Yeah, because they've been around for a while, and they're almost always in AAA. And some of them make even more than that. But
$60,000, not $600,000.
Yeah,
$60,000.
Yeah. But some of them make over $100,000, just depending on which team they're part of, whether they're part of the 40-man roster or whatever the case may be. And they're exempt. Minor league baseball is exempt from minimum wage laws. They got that in 2018. It takes a little bit away from it, because that was always the part of watching college sports, and to some degree minor league sports, the lower levels of minor league sports, what made it so fun to watch.
Yeah.
Well, I think the big draw for college sports is when you graduate from a school, regardless of the players who are on that field, you're always rooting for that, because that's part of your identity. It's part of your community. It's part of your people. And that doesn't go away, right? I'm a Florida State Seminole fan, not because I went to Florida State, and Jason is a Bulldog fan, not because he went to UGA, but because we were part of a community growing up. For me, it was Bobby Bowden is awesome. He's a great person, and every team that he had was a winner, and it was awesome to be rooting for them, especially in the 80s and 90s when Florida, Miami, and FSU seemed to run the entire country. But I don't think that goes away. And I do think there need to be transfer portal changes. And because we're running along, I'll just keep it at that. They need to limit the number of times a kid can transfer, because it's getting out of hand.
All right, we're going to go to break. We'll be right back.
Peach Pundit has an anonymous Patreon who would like to invite you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. No one should fight Alzheimer's alone. With your help, no one will. Learn more on their website, alz.org.
Golden Retriever Rescue of Atlanta, GRRA, is an all-volunteer, tax-deductible charitable organization. They are dedicated to providing veterinary care, comprehensive evaluation, and foster and adoptive homes to Golden and Labrador Retrievers who are abandoned, mistreated, neglected, or left in shelters throughout Georgia. We encourage you to visit their website grra.com and help connect people and dogs that need each other in their lives. You truly can make this world a better place by helping find homes of gold for these golden-hearted pups.
All right, folks. So we have a couple more topics that we're going to put into sort of quick hicks because we're
going to be as quick as we can.
We're going to be as quick as we can. We're already at 50 minutes, and Scott's a stickler for this. So, Scott, you first.
So over the weekend, the Georgia Republican Party had their convention where congratulations to the aforementioned Josh McCoon was reelected. I didn't have any doubt that he would be reelected. I just questioned whether or not it would make a difference if it was him or this guy, David Cross, and recognizing David Cross, in my opinion, is unqualified for that role. I just don't see how the role would be handled a whole lot differently between the two of them. And almost immediately, I am being proven to be correct in that. And this is why I say that. In order for the convention to pass their standing rules for the convention, a deal was struck with specifically the goofball, reject, and asshole clan known as the GRA. They wanted to pass specific resolutions. A couple of resolutions that they passed, we'll get into those in a second. I'll tease it out first. They passed some resolutions we're going to talk about. But in order for them to get the rules adopted, they agreed to lower quorum for resolutions to 40% of the body. And I guess there were over 1,800 and less than 1,900 delegates. And what happens every convention when the candidates are done running for their leadership positions, delegates get up and leave en masse. And usually somebody calls quorum. And that happened on Saturday after the last election. And they had fewer than 50% of the delegates in the room, but more than 40. So debate was allowed to continue on resolutions. So in a body that was less than 2,000 people, in a state where over 2 million people, or over 2.5 million people voted for Donald Trump. And you could say there are over 2.5 million Republican voters as a result of that. Less than 2,000 and less than 50% of that was allowed to vote on a pair of resolutions I want to bring to your attention. The first is the censure of John Burns, Speaker John Burns. And I won't read the entire thing, but just the Georgia Republican Party Convention censures Speaker Burns for violating his oath and calls on state legislators to condemn this dangerous and unconstitutional abuse of power, repair the damage to our republic, and commit themselves to securing the rights of every elected official and their constituents. That was a censure resolution, censuring the Speaker of the House of the state of Georgia from the convention floor using fewer than half of the delegates that showed up.
Over the Colton Moore fiasco, right?
Yes. And they passed another resolution. This wasn't the second one, but they passed another resolution commending Colton Moore. How out of touch and crazy is that?
Hey, when you can't win in the courts, you win at the Georgia Republican Party convention.
Apparently.
Yeah. And then, so you had another resolution that really hit the shockwaves, created all kinds of shockwaves, which was banning Brad Raffensperger from ever running for another Republican office ever again, not allowing him to qualify, and also committing to pay for the legal cost of the state party if Brad decides to sue the party. These resolutions are non-binding.
Right.
They're worth less than toilet paper because toilet paper is more useful. It actually serves a function. But this has created a future PR crisis for the party, as well as Brad Raffensperger, whenever it is he decides that he wants to run for office. Brad Raffensperger is a Republican. He may not be your flavor of Republican, but he's a Republican. And honestly, he's more electable than a lot of other people who are currently running for office in various races who have committed. Go ahead, Jason.
You know, I was talking to someone yesterday, and they said that the GRA, they want to be in the minority, like because their brand of conservatism or whatever you want to call it. I don't think it's conservatism. I think
It's not.
no,
It's
it's right.
populism.
It's right-wing populism. Can't win elections on a large scale.
Right.
They may have one-offs every now and then. Certainly Donald Trump is a one-off or two-off, but he campaigned on a message that resonated with independent voters. That's why he won.
Right.
They are content losing elections as long as it's with their candidate. That's it. They don't care about winning majorities. They don't care about winning enough seats to pass legislation. They care about making a point.
So the media gets to Josh McCoon and says, "Are you going to enforce the Raffensperger resolution?" And I'm going to play you the audio. This is courtesy of Raul Bali at WABE.
Well, I can tell you this. The Georgia Republican Party is always going to follow the law of the state of Georgia. And the law of the state of Georgia is pretty clear with regards to qualifying. So if someone submits the appropriate paperwork, including the loyalty oath, unless there is a case to be made that the loyalty oath would involve false swearing, I don't really see a way for the Georgia Republican Party to decline someone the opportunity to qualify. Obviously that presents the sense of the convention on what should happen, but ultimately we have to look at what Georgia law commands us to do and follow Georgia law, and that's what we're going to do.
Call me crazy here, but the loyalty oath, Buzz, I'm going to go to you because you haven't weighed in here, and go to you. I'm going to let Scott close, and we're going to move on.
Yep.
The loyalty oath thing, that's the kicker.
It's the dog whistle. It's the dog whistle to the GRA. I'm giving you the path forward. Go ahead, Buzz. What's your reaction? Because there's more to the story.
Yeah, I don't know that the loyalty oath would stand up in court if you really challenged it. Nevertheless, yeah, I mean, I ranted about this a little bit on Facebook, and most folks agree with me. I got a few who didn't, and that's fine. But it's I think so many thoughts. It's a group of people, the people who voted for this, and as you pointed out, it was less than half the delegates, and then some number did not. Would have voted no against this. Nevertheless, it was declared that it would have been passed. So
they also bundled them. They put them all in one slate. All of these resolutions passed on a single vote.
All the tricks, right? So it'd be interesting to know how widespread this is among this belief is among Republicans, whether they actually support this. But it's way too many. It's far too many.
Yeah,
it's far too many, and that brings embarrassment and shame to all of us who call ourselves Republicans.
Scott, you have 60 seconds.
Well, I've got more than that, but here goes. So what ends up happening is I pointed out when I heard that audio that he had left a loophole with the loyalty oath thing to challenge Raffensperger and we're talking about a crime because a false swearing thing is a crime. You can be prosecuted for that. And so there will be people in the future that are going to use Josh McCoon's words to try to prevent Brad Raffensperger from qualifying. So Josh went on a media tour yesterday. He was in Politically Georgia and gave them or political breakfast, whatever they're calling it now. And he was like, "We're going to qualify." And so it was like, "Oh, made it very clear." But within almost minutes, Josh McCoon takes to social media and he posted this.
Yeah.
And this is right after the ruling came out where James Hall is a locally elected official, by the way. He's a Republican who's locally elected in Chatham County. Josh McCoon writes, "As chairman of the Georgia Republican Party, I want to share my commitment to respecting the First Amendment rights of political associations, which include the ability to choose partners in upholding our party's values. In January 2025, the Georgia Republican Party Executive Committee made the difficult decision to move forward without former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan in future party activities due to concerns about alignment with our mission. Similarly, on March 18th, 2025, the Catoosa County Republican Party thoughtfully addressed some concerns about the conduct of 5 current and former county commissioners, believing it was important to uphold our Republican principles. County parties play a valuable role in understanding the commitment of local officials to our ideals, and we appreciate their efforts to align with the overall mission of protecting the integrity of our party. I express support for Catoosa County Republican Party's autonomy and affirm their right to make decisions they feel are in the best interest of their community. Together, we can work collaboratively to uphold our principles and create an inclusive environment environment for all those who share our vision. The dude's talking out of both sides of his mouth.
Yeah.
But you cannot say Catoosa County and the accountability rule, which was written by Alex Johnson and forced them into court where a judge was going to hold them in contempt and had to issue an order to the local clerk to qualify people. Like, that's the drama that you support. And it's okay at the local level, but at the state level, we're going to follow the law. Bullshit. You're so
Sorry, Miss
full of
Laura.
it. You're full of it. Like, get your head out of your anus. Do you understand the damage that you're doing? Do you even care?
But look,
Scott, I have a number for a really good therapist.
Just let me yell at my audience. It's perfectly fine therapy for me.
but this is the dance that Josh signed up for. This is the dance he has to do every day. Oh, I'm going to uphold the law. Oh, we're going to root out all these daggum rhinos. And
It must be a thing to gain the chairmanship of the Georgia Republican Party, but to lose every ounce of your principles.
It's so frustrating to me because I had so much respect for the guy, and then I have friends who are defending him, right? And because they're friends with him, not because he's right. They want to hear the good stuff, what he's saying. They want to hear, and they want to put stock in he's going to qualify Brad Raffensperger. But what that was to me, what I heard when I read that message was that he's telling Chatham County to go after James Hall. That's what he's saying. Because James Hall kicked his butt in court, and James Hall was right. And James Hall had the conservative position, and Josh he's butt hurt because we stood on conservative principles and he abandoned those principles and he got his butt slapped by the state Supreme Court and a unanimous decision. I'm sorry. I don't know what to say about him anymore. And I don't want to seem like I'm taking it personally. It's not about me. It's about the health of this organization that I have spent countless dollars and countless minutes and hours of my time trying to build up into something.
Well, I think what you'll see is more of what we've seen over the last couple of years, where people like Brian Kemp or Kelly Loeffler or any, maybe if Brad Raffensperger runs for something else, he'll do the same thing. You set up your own your own grassroots organization. You set up your own fundraising operation and own apparatus outside of the party because you can't trust them.
What does it say that Brian Kemp wasn't at the convention this weekend? How many sitting governors don't attend their state party convention? What does it say that several of the candidates for statewide office weren't at the convention?
I got a call from a senator who said he was there as a guest because his county party would not allow him to be a delegate. And there weren't very
And I'm sure that there were open seats.
There weren't very many elected officials there.
No,
because
as a matter of fact, we talked about this on the
missing.
Stay
Away.
Yeah, we talked about this on the Missing podcast, but there are only a handful of state reps there because the Republican retreat was scheduled for this weekend, and Josh didn't coordinate that with the House Republican caucus. So that's on him. If your state rep wasn't at convention, it's on the fact that party leadership didn't coordinate the
Before
events
we
with
move
them.
on to the last
Good on
topic.
Speaker Burns for giving his caucus a reason not to be there.
Before we move on to the last topic, I'll just say this. There used to be three legs to the Republican Party stool, right? You had the defense hawks, you had the social cons, and you had the fiscal cons.
Yep.
Today, you've added a fourth leg, and that fourth leg is the MAGA crowd. Unfortunately, the Republican Party is no longer catering to each of those crowds individually. They're only catering to the dominant one, and that's the MAGA crowd. And that's how you diminish the power of a political party. And personally, glad to see it. I wish, and both parties are doing a bang-up job at it, but especially the Republican Party. Someone who's politically homeless, I want more options at the ballot box. But, whatever. Before we close, the last topic is Juan Abrego Garcia, who this weekend, it was reported, will be coming back to the United States, despite the administration constantly saying, since he was wrongly deported in mid-March, that he could not be brought back. And he's being brought back to face criminal charges in Nashville. The criminal charges were controversial enough to cause the lead prosecutor inside that U.S. Attorney's office in Nashville to resign. But that's ultimately not why I wanted to bring this up, because Abrego Garcia is being used as, he's been sort of the face of the deportations because these individuals have not been given due process. And I've heard some people, particularly DOJ, say, see, he's a criminal. He committed these crimes. They're calling it human trafficking. He's not being prosecuted under what are technically human trafficking statutes. He's being prosecuted under something else. That's irrelevant to me. And the reason it's irrelevant to me is that the entire issue with not just Abrego Garcia, but anybody who has been deported without due process is the fact that they were deported without due process as required by the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. It says persons, not citizens, persons. And the Supreme Court has consistently said that that applies to citizens, legal permanent residents, or people who have some status, legal status in the United States, and undocumented migrants. You don't have to like it, but that is what the Fifth Amendment says. Please, by all means, go to your copy of the Constitution. And if you don't have one, I have like 3 of them, but if you don't have one, just Google it or go on ChatGPT and have ChatGPT explain it to you, because I don't even use Google anymore.
Because you're an old person that uses ChatGPT like Google.
Yes. I am the reason your energy prices are going up. I'm glad that Abrego Garcia is back in the United States. And if he is guilty of a crime, which requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt, he is innocent until proven guilty under our system of justice in the United States. I'm willing to accept that. But the issue here, at least for me, and I know many others, was he was not afforded the due process rights that are enshrined in the Fifth Amendment, the very document that I hear so many people say so much about. Then the Constitution matters, except for when it's inconvenient for you. So if he committed a crime and he is punished for that crime, I will accept that. At least he was given due process.
So this is something that's a new phenomenon. Like Nancy Mace tweeted, due process is for citizens, not illegals, right? And I was like, how is that?
Wrong.
How do you determine if somebody is here illegally? Say the words with me. Say it out loud. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when?
Process.
How do you determine if somebody is here illegally?
Due process.
You have to have a process, right? And we call that due process.
Right.
50 people who were
Right.
deported were
And
here
this is-
legally.
To our audience who is always yelling at me that Jason Pye is a screaming liberal, let me tell you something, okay? What Jason is articulating is something that is vitally important, because if an unfounded accusation is made against one American citizen who has been, and the accusation is that this American citizen is here illegally and they get deported, what does that do to our constitutional protections and all of our own rights? They're all subject to the whims of an accusation of one person, essentially. And that is not tenable. That's not our constitutional system. Yes, our constitutional system is slow and it moves like molasses at times, but there's a reason for that, because it's a promise that the government makes to you in exchange for governing. You can't just make an accusation that somebody's here illegally and then take action. You have to prove it. And then once you proved it, you can punish them. And don't mishear any of us here. Punish them. They're breaking the law.
Right.
But do it the right way.
But this also undermines the very thing that Trump is trying to do, which is get illegal immigrants out of the United States, right? Because this clogs up the system with all sorts of lawsuits and motions. And when all you do, just line up judges and have a ton of hearings. And if the judge says you're not here legally, plane's over there, goodbye. Do that.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And I don't know much about the Abrego case, right? I don't know much about his case. I've followed a little bit. I'm not an expert in it. I don't know what he's accused of. I've heard MS-13, something about a finger tattoo. I don't know. And some congressman that keeps, right? There's all that. I've been paying attention to Georgia-based stuff. But this is what I do know. If I am ever accused of a crime, I want my day in court.
I think it was Jefferson, and if it wasn't Jefferson, I'm sure someone might point it out, but he said that a government big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take everything you have. If a government is big enough to deny due process to people, a group of people you don't like, the quote unquote other, it's big enough to take due process away from you too.
Yep.
And it starts with immigrants, but it will not end here.
No.
It will not end here.
First they came for the Waymos, and now they're coming for the
We're
the
going to end on
illegals.
that.
Yeah, and with that, we're going to go.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to our Patreons. We call them the people who rock. They reach into their pockets every single month and give us a few bucks to keep this thing going. We're really grateful to them. If you'd like to join them, you can head on over to patreon.com/peachpundit. I'll also remind you that Peach Pundit has a merch shop. You can get that You Can't Spell Tariffs Without FFS shirt that Jason is sporting, or a polo like mine, or other snarky t-shirts. They're all out there. We also have hats and glasses and all that fun stuff. But these are the people who rock. Sam Thomas, Jordan Reed, Shannon Ferguson, Jeff Cobble, Hank Burnham, Ryan Purvis, James Hall, Colin Martin, Tony West, and our friends at Americans for Prosperity, Robert Lee, and our friends at Leasix Media, Stuart Wilkinson, Ron Daniels, Mike Buchert, our anonymous contributor who wants you to know more about the Alzheimer's Association, Bo Brennan, Ryan Graham, John Vestal, Reed Powell, Brent Harrell, Justin Wright, and Bethany Ballard. Thank you for being people who rock. Peach Pundit is Jason Pye, Buzz Brockway, and me, Scott Turner. You can find us at peachpundit.com and like and subscribe, recommend to a friend, drop a comment wherever you're listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Go Jackets.